Have you ever wondered how inflation shifts the dynamics of India's economy? From your daily groceries to national economic growth, inflation touches every aspect of life. But how does it really work within India's macroeconomic framework? Join us as financial expert Mr. Hariharan breaks down the causes and uncover the impact of inflation on one of the fastest growing economies.
Inflation. Now, all of us know what is inflation. Generally speaking, it is the rise in price of goods and services. And there are different types of inflation that are getting reported. We will look at two important ones. One is called CPI, the other is called WPI. WPI stands for Wholesale Price Index, and CPI stands for Consumer Price Index. So let's understand this. Let's take an example of a very common item like vegetables and fruits to understand this. So I stay in Mumbai, and in Mumbai we have this wholesale vegetable market. We call this as APMC. So in this APMC market, there is a lot of wholesale transaction of fruits and vegetables that happen. Okay, so let's hypothetically assume that in this APMC market, which is the wholesale vegetable market and fruit market, last year the price of tomatoes was say 20 rupees per kg. Today, the cost of tomatoes per kg in the wholesale market is say 25 rupees. So last year it was 20 rupees, today it is 25 rupees. So change in price is 5 rupees. And percentage wise, it is 5 divided by 20. So 25% rise in price of tomatoes in the wholesale market. So that is getting captured as WPI. What is the change in price of goods at the wholesale level is captured under WPI, Wholesale Price Index. You and I buy the tomatoes from our local vendor or the local market. So last year, let's assume the price of tomatoes in the local market where you and I purchased was 30 rupees. This year it is 40 rupees. So the price change is 30 to 40, 10 rupees. Percentage wise, it is 10 divided by 30, 33%. So we say that the change in price of goods at the consumer level where you and I go and purchase is captured by CPI. So in the example that we discussed, WPI change in price of tomatoes at the wholesale level was 25%. Change in price of tomatoes at the consumer level, at the local level was 33%. And we say that inflation there was 25, inflation is 33. So this is the broad definition of WPI and CPI. Now both of these numbers get reported every month. On the 12th and the 14th of the month, the indicator, the value for the previous month is announced. So in the month of November, which is on Tuesday and on Thursday of this coming week, you will find both these numbers will be published for the month of October. And they will tell us what was the change in price in the month of October or at the wholesale level and at the consumer price, right? Now, important for us to quickly understand is what is there in this WPI. Now, each of these has a basket, of goods that are being used to calculate the price change. So when you look at WPI construct, 64% of the basket is manufactured goods. So change in price of those manufactured goods is what is captured, and 64% weight is assigned to those changes. 23% is food articles like pulses, vegetables, fruits. Then we have non-food articles like oil seeds. Then you have mineral, you have crude petroleum and natural gas. And about 13% is fuel and power, which is LPG, petrol and high-speed diesel. So look at the construct. Change in price of the goods in this basket is captured under WPI. Okay. So manufactured goods has got food products, vegetable oil, so on and so forth, chemicals, so on and so forth. So you find basically majority of the weight in the basket in WPI is to do with manufacturing, right? 23% is food articles, and this is also at the wholesale level. Now, important to look at is what is happening to WPI over the last few years. So this is the trend of WPI in India. So every month it is getting published. So September 24, it was 1.84%. What does it mean? That price of goods in the WPI basket overall has increased by about 1.8% in the month of September 24 as compared to their prices in the month of September 23. So it's all year on year. But for that month, shift in price or change in price, okay, on a yearly basis, but for that particular month. If you look at it, you see that WPI trend is all over the place, right? So you have got positive, you got negative, then it becomes positive, so on and so forth. So WPI numbers have become negative for they were negative for quite some period of time. And there was a time, where WPI was actually negative for 17, 18 consecutive months also. And then slowly and steadily the WPI prices are again become positive. So that's on the WPI bit. Let's come to what affects you and I more directly is CPI. So WPI is also an indicator, but WPI does not affect us directly. CPI is something that affects you and I as consumers direct. And what does the CPI basket look like? 46% of the basket is made of food and beverages. And if you were to look at our own household consumption, and I will share some very interesting statistics when we go to GDP, but typically a household spends a lot of money on food and beverages, and therefore food and beverages has the highest weightage in the CPI basket. And what is there is a list of items that are there, all of these that you and I use on a regular, consistent basis, right? But please mind, this is all changes in price that's happening at our level. When you and I are buying it from DMart or from the local shop, what is the change in price of these goods and services? So 46% is food and beverages, 28% is miscellaneous. And what is covered under miscellaneous is health, transport, utensils that we use in our house, recreation, entertainment, personal care, so shampoo, soaps that we use gets captured under miscellaneous. Then, of course, we got about 7%, which is fuel and power. Then we have got housing. Then we have got clothing and footwear, and so on and so forth. So please remember that 46% or majority of the basket is food and beverages, followed by miscellaneous. Again, if you look at it, 46 plus 28, most of the things that you and I use on a consistent, regular basis is what the basket of CPI contains. Now, as I said, every month these numbers will keep changing. And this is something that affects us directly. And this is the trend of CPI in India. So while WPI we saw was negative in phases, then it became positive, and it was positive less than 1% for most of the time. But WPI has always been by and large above 4 to 5% to 6%. If you look at historical average for last so many years, the CPI average in India is about 6.3 to 6.4%. So on an average, inflation in India is rising by about 6.5%. Okay. Now again, variations will keep happening because of what's happening inside the basket. Of late, what we are seeing is that the CPI numbers are going up more because of the vegetable prices, fluctuations in vegetable prices. Now, while this is something that you and I do feel, in terms of the inflation numbers, in terms of inflation, what is also important for us to understand, is that our inflation is not just limited to CPI, which I said is about 6.5% on an average. Now, I have a bad habit, of recording my expenses. And if you were to look at the change in price of goods and services that is typically consumed in a household, all your grocery items, personal goods like shampoo, soap, etc., I have found that the change in price is not 6-7%. The change in price is somewhere about 10 to 11%. So while the numbers that get reported is about 4, 5, 6, 7% on an average, I only want all of you to look at it slightly differently. Don't look at inflation as only 6%, 7%. Inflation is very different from what you and I see, right? And majority of us feel that inflation has also grown with us over a period of time. So I know everything about inflation. That's not the case. Inflation, according to me, is a silent killer. And therefore, you have to be very wary of what's happening in terms of inflation numbers. Okay. So CPI is about 6-7%. Apart from this CPI, what you and I face today is something called lifestyle inflation. And this is very, very interesting. Okay. Now, what is this lifestyle inflation? This is something which is affecting us, and it's going to affect all the future generations. This is something which did not perhaps exist in our previous generation, right? So what is this lifestyle inflation? Let us quickly understand. But if I were to ask you 20 years back, 30 years back, how many of us had a landline phone at home? Perhaps all your responses will be yes, isn't it? Now understand this very carefully. That landline phone that we had at home was an instrument, either a BSNL or the MTNL instrument, whatever it was. And that instrument was used by all the family members. So if there are 4 family members, all of us were using the same instrument. And if you also recollect, most of us would not have changed that instrument for 15, 20 years. Even if some of the buttons were not working, we used to use a pen, to press that button. isn't it? All of us have done this. And even if the wire used to get entangled, when you lift the receiver, the wire used to be entangled, you used to bend and speak, but perhaps you would not have changed that instrument for 15, 20 years. Today, all of us have a mobile phone. And how many mobile phones are there in a family? Equal to the number of members, isn't it? So if there are 4 people in the family, we have got 4 mobile phones at home. We had only one landline phone 20, 30 years back. And this mobile phone that we have, we keep changing it every 2 to 3 years, isn't it? And every time we change, we upgrade, which means we buy a more expensive one as compared to the previous time. So this is the lifestyle inflation. This is just one example of lifestyle inflation. You look at all those services that are available today, whether that is Uber, Ola, Zomato, Blinkit, you name it. All of these in a way is being consumed by all of us, which was not there 15, 20, 30 years back. So it's not just the inflation which is change in price. So if I have been consuming say 5 kgs of atta every month, and if that atta price has become from 320, it has become 350, that is getting captured under CPI. But what is not getting captured under CPI is this lifestyle change, visits to restaurants, dining, entertainment, travel. Travel in a bit will get included in CPI, but all of these that services that we use, is the lifestyle inflation. So please be mindful of the fact that it is not just 6-7% of inflation. You'll have to add that lifestyle inflation also to your inflation. So the third inflation that we have to be mindful of, again very relevant in today's context, is medical inflation. In India, medical expenses are rising on an average by 12 to 14%. And to be honest, a lot of these hospitals don't look like hospitals. They have become sort of 4-star, 5-star hotels. And most of the planned hospitalizations that people do today's generation want to do it in a good hospital. For example, a C-section delivery. Most mothers would be mothers would want to have it done at a good place. And the cost of cesarean operation today is on an average 1 lakh rupees, and it is increasing by 12 to 14% every year. So medical inflation is also something that we have to be mindful of. So inflation, while we looked at CPI, WPI, from an individual perspective, from an investment perspective, I think it's very, very important to look at all these elements of inflation, right? So that is about inflation.
Thanks for your detailed answer. If you have any doubts regarding this or any other financial decision, don't hesitate to book an appointment with our financial experts. The link to the appointment is given in the description below. And also, would you like to know more about finance and investment? Then we would recommend you to attend our live webinar. The link to the webinar is also given in the description below. The webinar is absolutely free. If you like this video, hit like. If you are new to our channel, please do subscribe. Thanks for watching.